Well, we are so glad that you guys are here. Okay, let's get real for a second, though. How are you guys feeling? A number of you have flown in just yesterday.
Love you, man.
And the day before. Kevin, I know what that Japan jet lag is like. You guys doing okay? Okay. Manuel, you had quite an adventure. It involved New York City.
What's that story?
Manuel, do you want to share it? It's your deal.
We flew out of Santo Domingo. We were hoping to fly yesterday at 6 a.m. We missed our flight because of my son's passport was renewed and we couldn't get it through customs. And then we went by a hotel near the airport there, slept there an hour and a half, and then took another flight to New York. Slept in New York last night, flew in this morning.
Wow.
So typically, it only takes 3.5 hours to get to Atlanta. It took us 36.
Wow.
So we're excited to
the journey.
Hey, so glad y'all are here.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, we are so thankful that you're here, even feeling jet lagged and everything like that. Our goal this evening, and really the whole weekend, is simple. We want to hear from you guys. We want to learn about your ministries. For many in our church has grown in the last few years. Many of us aren't really familiar with your ministries and where you're at in the world. And so our goal is to learn from you so that as partners, I'm reminded of the letter of 3 John, when John is talking about sending missionaries. He says he wants to send missionaries in a manner worthy of God. And so that's really our goal. We want to hear from you so we can send you back to your places, filled up, encouraged, in a manner worthy of God, because you've been sent out for the sake of the name. And so we take that very, very seriously. We love you guys. We're just super excited for the next few days. Well, I wanted to kick things off by just talking about where you're serving. I think 2 kind of common threads that bind all of your ministries together, cities and local churches. And so I want to start by just talking about where you guys are serving. Our introductions, we got a little bit of a glimpse of that. But I want to talk about your cities. And so Manuel and Jenna, let's start with you. You've been in Santo Domingo now for a little over a year. I know, Manuel, you're from the DR originally. But Jenna, you've been there now for a little over a year. So first of all, how are you adjusting? How has that been for your kids, just being in a new country for over a year?
It's going really well. I'm really thankful that I knew Spanish before moving. And that's helped the kids and I tremendously in that transition. And that was God's providence that I was fairly fluent before moving. But it's going well. Learning to drive, learning to shop, all those things have been challenges, but they're not insurmountable. So the Lord's very kind.
Praise God. Well, Manuel, tell us about Santo Domingo, bustling city. What makes the heart of that city beat? Why is it a strategic place for the advance of the gospel in the DR?
Yeah, Santo Domingo is about 3.4 million people. That was according to the previous census, and they have a new one now coming out, and they're projecting 3.8 million most likely. It's a growing city. It's one of the strongest economy in Latin America, so there's a lot of tourism. There's 30 baseball teams. All the major league teams have a baseball academy. It's like a factory there, pretty much, that is developing baseball players. And the closeness to the U.S. makes it a very popular city to come to and do business and consider that as a hub for many reasons. So the other aspect of Santo Domingo is that it has become a saving place where people can come from other countries and find safety, escaping communism from other Latin American countries. They come to the island, and we have people from Venezuela, Cuba. We have people from even El Salvador and other countries that are coming and find DR as a safe haven for them and their families, or even as a bridge to come to the States eventually. So the cities, the nations are coming to the city of Santo Domingo. And we see that as a great opportunity to not necessarily go out, but reach those who are coming to our nation. And of course, the country of Haiti, whom we share the island with. We have a good number of Haitians that move to our side of the island to find a better living and protect their families as well. So the Lord, I'm born and raised there. The Lord called me after being 17 years here in the States to go back to the island and plant Iglesia Ciudad de Gracia, Grace City Church. And there's a great need for the evangelical church to be mobilized, encouraged to be a sending agent. And we want to be, by God's grace, we are praying that God would help us stir up the hearts of those who are there to reach the nations as well. And our goal, our desire, our dream for the long haul is to plant a church in every one of the provinces, 32 provinces in the island of Santo Domingo, a healthy church that shares the gospel, the good news of Jesus to our island.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and Manuel was a part of a church plant in Atlanta, and so I'm kind of curious, like, what is similar about church planting in Santo Domingo and church planting in Atlanta, and what is, different? You have any thoughts there? This is not one of the questions Billy sent them, by the way.
No, all good.
Yeah,
it's a great question.
Yeah.
Yep.
No,
It.
it's a good question. I had the privilege of doing a residency with the Summit Church and Gospel Hope, Summit Church in North Carolina and Gospel Hope here in Atlanta. And a lot of what I learned was great, but it necessarily didn't translate to Latino culture.
Yeah.
So one of the things that stood out to me was the concept of building a team, a launch team, people that you're kind of coming alongside and kind of sharing the vision that they would join you and go out with you. That concept is not necessarily something that the island understood because they aren't used to the Lone Ranger missionary that comes in and shares the gospel, and one by one they become, converts. So that one was, which is biblical too, and is also Paul also came with teams of people to work with. That was a big one for me, understanding, sharing the vision so others come alongside, not just fill the church of other believers, but to empower them and mobilize them to the ministry. That was a big difference. And Jenna has one.
One, I think, would be the search for the location to meet. We searched and pursued so many different leads before finally landing on the one we originally thought was impossible. And God made it come to pass in His time and provided for it. So the constant search of, well, what happens when we can't meet here anymore? Like that, I think that is definitely a common thread with a lot of planters. Like, where next when we don't meet here
we definitely, experienced that. Contextualization, you bring up, and I think that's what's fascinating about this, because we're all kind of doing the same work. That's what's so great about our partners here is it's like, oh, well, I'm just doing what Brian does,
Yep.
And so, but I think that's an important thing, because I think that's so important. And that's something so unique about Christianity, is how the gospel is able to be contextualized in a place and in a time. And and so I think that's, you mentioned that with just how to even build a team. Like, I would never have thought that, that kind of approach, which is so common in, modern, American city church planting, would not be received there. So that's an interesting comment. Well, Kevin and Isaiah, how would y'all, I'm sure, what are those some contextual differences in terms of even how you go about planting the church?
Well, I never have been on a church planting team in the U.S., and I've been in Japan for 20 years. So I'm having a hard time always trying to figure out what's American and what's Japanese and what's not. But for the team building thing, I don't know how culturally influenced this is, but we've seen several different church plants launched now, and it seems like every newer church launch has a stronger team to launch with it. And I think what's happening is the other churches are able to contribute.
Yeah.
And there's already this kind of credibility. So Japan's a very group culture. So you have to, you need that trust and credibility that's earned from beforehand. So when we started, ours was the third church in our network, and we kind of came in from the outside. It was really hard to get a team started. So it's kind of just us two, and then two other units that were like committed full time as missionaries. Besides that, it was hard to recruit any local people. So, but then the next teams would kind of hive off. That's kind of a model, right? You hive off. They would hive off from a previous church, and they'd have a great team with Japanese speakers and foreigners mixed together. We're international. We're pretty much all international, multilingual or bilingual churches. A lot of us, right? Everybody up here. So,
what was the catalyst? Because it feels like y'all are like doing so well now. Like, were there any like catalytic moments along the way where it went from like struggling on the vine to like, I think a real like, I mean, everything I know about your church, it's like I want to go to church there. It just seems so healthy and it just seems full of life. So,
like in our church in Kobe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your church in Kobe.
Sure.
So Kevin and Nozomi, you've been in Japan now for nearly 20 years.
Yep.
Not all of that time, my understanding, doing church planting.
Yeah.
6 years now in Kobe. Tell us a little bit about that journey just to church planting and staking your life in Japan. What's Japan like?
So I went to Japan originally in 2003 and worked with Japanese churches, all Japanese speaking. Basically, I was teaching an English class. We still do a lot of English stuff. And then we wanted to reach younger people because the churches are pretty like average age, 65, 70, something like that. And the demographic is just so different than trying to reach college people and bring them into church. So we started coffee shops, did coffee shop ministry. And that was awesome, but we saw a lot of people come to Christ at our first coffee shop / college outreach. But we just had more and more of a conviction that we needed this to be a church, like church planting, just like you said today. You know, that's what the apostles were doing in Acts, starting churches, city to city. So we had that conviction, and so we went to seminary in Japan. Nozomi and I both went to seminary in Japan, and then afterwards moved to this. To the region west. You guys know Tokyo, it's kind of East Japan, then West Japan, Osaka, Kobe, that's where we are. We moved out there, and because we had this conviction to plant churches, that's why we went there. And then we saw Mustard Seed Network. And our image was that you have these foreign missionaries starting churches. I was thinking it's going to mostly be other foreigners, and then maybe there'll be a lot of Japanese people who are just interested in English. But one of the first weeks we went there, we saw this, I think he's a Japanese, I think in his like 60s, who speaks no English at all, who is led to the Lord by a Japanese person who was led to the Lord by one of the missionaries, and he was getting baptized that day. And we're like, what's happening here? And just, it was just feeling that spirit of just God was at work, you know?
It's awesome.
And so we wanted to partner with them and then grew in that relationship and you know, honestly, you ask why is Kobe strategic? I think any city in Japan, there's a lot of people, right? That's what God said to Jonah. There's a lot of people here. Love the city with a lot of people, and any city in Japan is totally unreached. 0.2% is the population of evangelical or of Protestant Christians throughout Japan. So any city that you go to, strategic. Whatever the percentage is, it's within the margin of error of the research of how many Christians are per population. So it's strategic. But we honestly, part of it was that we liked Kobe, right? It's a beautiful city.
It's a cool city, for sure.
Yeah. But I don't know if any catalyst of like that made it healthy. It's just been kind of this crazy, difficult struggle. But then now we look and we see, wow, God really has been at work, and things seem to be really full of spiritual life right now. So, because of what He's done, yeah.
And then, Brian Carley, also part of a church plant in Atlanta, and now planting in Paris. So I'll ask you the same question I asked Manuel. Similarities, differences, like things you learned, things you had to unlearn.
Yeah, so we were part of church plant renovation. We were around from basically the beginning. So what the core team at renovation was like 40 people or something like that. I don't know when it started. And the whole idea of planting with a core team is pretty new to France as well. That's how this church was planted. We joined the church we are in right now and helping root down. We joined it about a year into it being planted. So it wasn't us that planted it. We weren't a part of the initial plant team. So it was started from the contribution of, I think, 5 churches in the Paris area, all part of the same Baptist denomination. And in the last 10 years, there's been this growth of a vision for planting more churches in Paris. There was a guy named Edward Nelson, brilliant guy. Unfortunately, he passed a couple years ago in a tragic accident in his 40s. But he was just passionate about, we need to plant more churches in Paris. And so from there, now 10 years in, there's been 4 churches planted. And so we were the result of, I think, 5 people from one church and 3 people from another church and 10 people from another. And to say, okay, this part of Paris, there is no evangelical church. So we're between the 8th and the 9th district, 120,000 people, only French-speaking evangelical church in that area.
Wow.
Differences. I think there in the United States, there's a, especially the South, a cultural feeling of like, and I shared this at the staff meeting, if I have affinities with somebody and we get to know each other and we kind of have a friendship here, me inviting them to church is a natural thing, and they would naturally maybe be interested and come. And then maybe through some time they would go, yeah, maybe I do believe this stuff. And then they would start, reading the Bible and join a small group, and they become a Christian. That is not natural in Paris. You're face to face with the reality of what the Bible actually teaches, and sometimes we forget in America that anybody who comes to Christ is a miracle. It is a product of the Holy Spirit regenerating their heart, opening their eyes to see the glory of Christ and raising them from spiritual death to life. And so that's what you're praying for. And so the idea that, hey, we're going to plant a church and people might just show up and we're just going to grow, and I'm going to be friends with people in this area, and yeah, they'll come to the church and they'll think it's cool and they might start attending. That doesn't work. And so you're going to claw and scrape your way for every disciple and every person in that church through a lot of prayer and a lot of work.
I'd love to learn. I'd love to hear more about like disciple making in that context. I mean, what you're describing is a little bit of what I was just saying, living by the power of the Holy Spirit, because you can't kind of fall into I guess what you just described about the affinity is like kind of a naturalistic view of, it's like we're friends, I believe this, you believe this too. It feels very humanistic in a sense. And so you can kind of imagine that without the power of the Spirit. And so, I'd love to hear more about like tell us about one of your disciple-making relationships.
Yeah, so who should I list? I'll give an example of a new neighbor that I've connected with, Thomas. Thomas he is friends, his child is in the same class as my child in preschool. And so this was actually a microwaved relationship. It's super cool. This doesn't normally happen, but we have hit it off in conversations. We realized we have some similar perspectives politically, and we just talk after dropping our kids off. And eventually it was like, we should do brunch. We should get together, our families. So we do brunch at his place, and we're talking, and he's just curious, like, what exactly is this pastor thing you do, right? And there's always the assumption, it must be some kind of American thing you're doing. And so then it was like, oh, your church is in French. Oh, there's a French pastor there too. Okay, this is weird. And he's got some kind of Catholic background, but he's not in Catholic church. So anyway, they end up coming to church because he's really intrigued. We were doing a series on identity. And he's like nerding out over identity. He sends me like 100 links to these different lectures from a university on the topic. And anyway, they came and he was just blown away. It was something, I mean, people have never experienced what you experience in an evangelical church. It's nothing like they would expect. And so he said, I'm going to come for the rest of the series, but then I'm not coming anymore. Right?
Wait, I'm going to come for the series.
Yes.
And then I want to come here. Okay.
Yeah, we'll come for the rest of the series, but after that, don't expect us.
Yeah.
And so now the question is, what's the next step for Thomas? I often think about French people as cats. Americans are dogs. The dog is excited when you give it attention. The cat runs away. You have to pretend that you're not interested in the cat. And then it comes by to check out what's going on. So
Americans are such dogs, aren't they? We just love attention.
I know.
Something's happening? Something's going on?
So the question is, what's the next step, right? I've let it cool off. I'm not like, okay, dude, you need to come to our small group now next week. What's the next step for Thomas? What's the next conversation that we can take? And so there's another guy I've known for a year, and he doesn't do well in groups, so we get together one-on-one. And it's me pushing the button a little more, pushing the subject a little further each time. Hey man, you still got that cigarette problem. Yeah, I can't quit, I know it's a problem. Man, you need some kind of power that you don't have, that you're not gonna find in yourself if you wanna be released from this. I know you wanna talk about that Jesus thing. I'm just telling you, I'm just saying, you should come sometime.
That's awesome. You know something that struck me, Billy, and I haven't visited your church, but I have visited Paul and Abby's, and something that struck me, because it's an international church, and I probably would have said, even up to a few years ago, I'm not a huge fan of international churches, which is surprising to you, because now I'm like a huge fan of international churches.
Amazing.
And I just like see I've changed, you know, and y'all's church was a big part of that change. But something that struck me was, you know, we were there and there was like a lunch. This was like the main one, and there was like a lunch afterward. And Paige and I were sitting there talking after the service, and we were talking to this woman, and I was like, so where are you from? You know, thinking she was from like, you know, St. Louis. And because it's an international church, you know, she's an expat or something. And she goes, I'm from Paris. I was like, you know, I know you like, live in Paris. But I was like, where are you from? She goes, Paris. I'm Parisian. I'm French. And I was blown away by that. I was like, whoa, what are you doing? And for her, like, it was like she could, because she had grown up, you were talking about like Catholic background, for her it was almost like easier to hear like the gospel in English than it was for her to hear it in French. And so she had really connected with that international church. And, you know, even though she was Parisian, she was being discipled there, and she grew there, and she loved the church. So I was blown away by that. And that like kind of began this whole like journey that I've been on of like falling in love with the international church. But I'd love to hear just about y'all's church and how it interacts with, you know, expats and people that we might think like, you know, but then also like the old school Parisians of.
Yeah, maybe too. I mean, just for context. Okay, Brian, he's at a church called, and I'm going to butcher the French here, Elise Saint-Lazare. That's great. Okay, Paul and Abby, Emmanuel International Church, turn down. Okay, both in Paris, both gospel preaching churches, but different strategies. And so Paul and Abby, it might be helpful for our church to even know like what is an international church. You know, is it just a church that's in another country? But really, like, what is it as a model, and why is your church, in particular, an international church, positioned to reach a global city like Paris in a unique way?
I'll just start by saying it's been a journey for us, too. When we originally started, Paul he already spoke French, he already loved France, it was just me. And I was just trying to figure out how to make this make sense. And so Edward Nelson was the one who really talked to us and presented the idea of an international church. And to be honest, it was a bit of a concession on Paul's part at first. But for me, it felt like God was giving us a bridge, a way for our family to follow the call Paul was feeling, but to include me and who I was and where I was at that point. And so, again, a bit of a concession on the front end, but have absolutely, in a similar way, just our mind has been expanded on the need and the usefulness of the international church. But you can maybe talk more about that.
Well, I'm on a limb here, take Brian's analogy. If the typical Parisian is a cat, I think of the international, if you want to compare the two, because it's a different context, I think it's more like you have a bunch of stray puppy dogs who come week after week, and there's different ones every week. And obviously they're very cute, but there's only so many puppy dogs you can pet and play with, but in this kind of ministry, there's a lot of transients. You hope for people, and with Rouet, where you were, Rouet, ma maison, they've been there 60 years.
Yeah.
And they have at this point.
There was definitely some stables in that congregation.
There's essentially what you have to have is a core group of people who live there, right? And there's a bunch of situations where you think, just to help you think about, right, the kind of people, right? So you have people who, maybe the husband is French, maybe the lady you were talking to, she was French, maybe she married a Brazilian. And this was just an agreement on their part. They wanted to be in an English-speaking church because that's the way her husband preferred to worship, and she ended up liking it as well. You have students, right, who are just there for a short season. But to be really established, you need that core of people who really live there, work there. They're not really going anywhere. But then you have all these stray dogs week after week, right? It's I said puppy dogs, right? Cute dogs, right? Nice dogs, not dirty, mangy dogs, like cute ones, right? People coming week after week. We don't have to, unlike Brian's context, we really don't have to work hard. Like literally every single week, we are having people come. In our small little church, 12, 15 guests a week. Some of them just there for the weekend, wanting to worship. A lot of them, I just moved into the city. And so emotionally, in ministry-wise, discipleship-wise, I'm going to try to bless this person as much as I can. I had a guy he was from the UK, finishing up his medical training, doing an internship in Paris. And he just, said goodbye to me on Sunday. He'd been with us for 4 weeks, and that was his time period. But he was just like, thank you so much. It was such a blessing. I'm going to go home, tell my church, we're going to pray for you. But, I have 4 weeks to encourage that guy. I don't know everything about him. And the next week, someone new is going to come. And then we have students that are there for a year or 2 years. So that's just to give you a picture of it. It's just people coming relentlessly, and it's such an opportunity. And like Abby said, it opened our heart to realize that you have this chance to disciple the nations coming to your doorstep, because Paris is a global city. Any global city is going to have that reality, right? Any of you speaking English can come in and have an impact if you have all you have to have is this relational heart and, of course, the gospel.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty powerful. And so I love France. I love French culture. Our kids are in French school. We speak French. We're going on field trips. She's learning. We go on field trips with their French classmates, and I just accompanied a trip and was talking to the French teachers and parents got to share about what I do as a pastor. That is the most fun conversation to have with any French person, pasteur, and they're just like, what is that? They don't understand. But so we want to do that, but a lot of our life and ministry is just encouraging these people week after week and hoping that they go back to their home church and they have learned more about what it means to be a biblical Christian, hoping that maybe some of them come to Christ, and they're in Paris. And then for those who are there, giving them this opportunity to be on mission to, again, reach the nations, which is the Great Commission, Matthew 28. And so I feel a super huge privilege. I think we both feel that. It's just such a privilege to get to do that in Paris, which is a beautiful, amazing city, right?
Speaking of kind of what ministry y'all do, like here we have Melvin from Nicaragua.
Good job.
Thank you. Like, I learned from John Vogt. He is my Spanish tutor, but Atlanta, international city, obviously, and you see, kind of in the international church way. You see a lot of people that kind of come in for a little while and move out. That's probably similar in your ministry. I know you have some staples in your congregation, but you also have people that settle for a time and then kind of transition on. So I'd love to hear. We love Melvin's church, and Melvin's an old friend, but tell us a little bit more about your ministry week to week, and just kind of even just riffing off of some of what you've just heard. I'd love to hear some things that you've resonated with as you've heard it in the past couple minutes here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the invitation. Coming to Atlanta is a very interesting experience for someone coming from Central America. Well, first of all, there is a different perception of people when they move to the United States. So people come to the U.S. to work and make money. That is their expectation. And so sometimes that can be a barrier, just like you were saying, that sometimes comfort can be a barrier. And so for people to hear that, the true gospel of Jesus Christ, that we have salvation in Christ, that's something completely foreign to them, because they're coming from a prosperity gospel perspective, a prosperity gospel teaching. So that's a completely new thing when they hear the gospel. I feel also that, speaking about some of the differences in ministry, in Nicaragua, people have a little more respect for clergy, like pastors and leaders. And it seems like once they move to the U.S., that respect kind of goes away a little bit. And mainly because also going back to the prosperity gospel, they are burnt by it, and so they have this idea, well, this is a pastor and, he's just trying to live off of people, one more guy. So you're fighting against all these presuppositions about ministry and about pastors. So, that's a big challenge. That's a big challenge.
Yeah, talking about like kind of a post-Christian world or a reactionary Christian world, obviously in France, is it like so post-Christian? Like you're saying, like they don't even know, like Christianity is obviously a part of the, architecture and, cultural heritage, but in terms of like, I'd be even curious, like, are people reacting to Christianity, maybe the Catholicism of their childhood or something, but how have y'all interacted with that, or how would y'all? That seems like a big part of the cultural context of just Europe in general.
I'll let Brian speak in a second, but I'd say I'm always surprised to find that it's not everyone you meet is Catholic background, but there's obviously a huge cultural heritage there. So it is generally influenced French culture, and I would say the French are very objective and very logic-driven, and so I think that they look at things in kind of a detached way. And so I shared this with Brian earlier. I was on that field trip that I went on. One of the moms started asking me about the images on the church building, because we were staying in an old monastery that had been converted to a hostel type thing for the kids. And she was asking me what each one meant. There's the four, and I'm not even good with this. I know it's traditionally there's the ox, there's the I always forget. But so I was telling her, look, I'm Protestant, right? So there's a symbolism here. It's not necessarily biblical. It's just something that came up. But I thought she was Catholic and was going to start accusing me, because I've been accused by Catholics of like, what are you Protestants? Like, why do you think you can do this? Like, can you have your own church? Like, you can't do that. Like, you're not under the Pope. But this lady, literally, she was just like, tell me about these gospels. I don't understand. What are these gospels? Yeah. And I was like, well, I talked about Matthew. I'm preaching through Luke. I talked about Luke's gospel and the unique things about that, and how Jesus has come to save the downtrodden and the poor. I could just tell, again, that logical, like she's listening and resonating with that, but she's totally post-Christian. She's grown up and she's seen kind of cultural Christianity and thought it was just, had nothing to do with the actual message of Jesus. She could tell. It's just a bunch of traditions, and these people actually are pagan. In the Brittany region, she said all of her neighbors at Sugar Brown, it's all syncretism, paganism. But I'll let Brian say.
I would say we're tasting that in America. Just fast forward that a few hundred years.
Yeah.
You know? So what I'm going to share, I'm sure you could think of individuals where that's the case for, but don't think of individuals, think of general populations. So like my hairdresser when I was in the 20th, she would cut my hair. She didn't know what a pastor was. Like, couldn't tell you, you know? It wasn't even confusing it with a priest, you know, just, I don't know what that is. Had a great lively conversation with a Catholic guy that came to our Thanksgiving events. We're in a bar. I mentioned Abraham in our conversation. He said, who? And I thought maybe it was my accent, it was the volume in the place. Didn't know who Abraham was, right? This guy is a guy that he's a Catholic, he attends Mass, he will pick a fight with an atheist, right? The biblical illiteracy is extreme. People don't know who Noah is. People don't understand anything from the Bible. And while we think of France as a Catholic country, there is a rich heritage there. It was considered, the first daughter of the Catholic Church. It is also the most atheist country in Europe, in Western Europe. 40% would claim atheism over, I think, a 25% Catholicism or something like that.
Yeah.
10% would claim Islam.
Yeah. And that's growing probably the most
Yes.
rapid.
Oh, yes. That is the most
From the
growing.
Middle East, North Africa, where
Majority North Africa. So you have Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, former French colonies.
Interesting.
Yeah,
The way I've tried to describe, I mean, like we are kind of moving into a like post-Christian age in one sense, but the way I've tried to describe like Europe, like you might say something like, that person's a narcissist or that's Pandora's box or something, but like none of us ever like worshiped Roman gods, but there's like a thing that's like a part of us now. Like we were never actually like Roman pagans, but and so that's kind of more where Europe is. It's like they never like, it's not like their families, were really worshiping Jesus in a sense, but that's still just kind of a little bit of part of the rhythm, but so much of it's unknown too.
To believe in a inerrant perspective of the Bible is to them to believe that Greek mythology is history.
Yeah.
100%.
And y'all are dealing with, Manuel, there's like a cultural reactionary, you're having to like do some deconstruction of like, how people even understand the gospel before you're able to maybe present a faithful, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how would that be, how is the Santo Domingo context there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We have like different fronts right now in the city of Santo Domingo. You have the confusion of the prosperity gospel, and then you have also the this misunderstanding of what Christianity is. So one extreme is all about money, and you pray through your problems, and God is gonna open the skies and give you all the money you need. And the other one is the extreme of works-based salvation. So my grandma taught me the gospel. I think this is what you do. I think this is what you need to do to be saved and all that. So when they're coming through our doors, I remember one phrase by Tim Keller who said that when you're preparing your messages, think and imagine the people that you want to be there. So you have to kind of be very broad with your application or presentation of the gospel to be able to include everyone who is kind of there listening to that message. But it comes down to relationship, like all of them have said. Eventually, they don't want to see you. They don't want to see themselves as projects of, this new church that is coming, and this guy is having coffee with you because he wants to grow his church. That's not our motivation, but he wants to know that you really care for them and that you love them. And eventually, that's kind of the door that opens their heart to be able to eventually understand what the gospel really is when you model it that way.
Kevin and Nozomi, I'd love to hear a little bit about Mustard Seed Kobe, and maybe a two-part question here, but just how is the Lord, Japan, highly unreached, very difficult place, but I got to visit your church a month ago, and just to see the Lord moving through your church, Mustard Seed Kobe, how have you seen the Lord work in your church in the last 6 years to see Japanese people come to faith? And then let's talk a little bit about the network, the Mustard Seed Network, and how the Lord's using the Mustard Seed Network to reach Japan.
You want to talk about your ladies? And then, yeah, I'll talk about the Mustard Seed Network first, and then she's a real missionary. She's pretty amazing and has this awesome. She meets with all these ladies, and so you can share some stuff. But so Mustard Seed Network, we mentioned. Or Jeremy mentioned, we want to plant churches in all the largest cities in Japan. And there's 12 cities with over 1 million people. So we want to plant 12 churches in those 12 cities by 2025. And yeah, we're international bilingual also, as we said. But we're kind of Japanese emphasis bilingual, because somehow in Japan, English tends to take over, like it becomes a dominant kind of language somehow. And then Japanese who come in, who can understand English, sometimes will also almost have like a higher position. So then Japanese who come in who don't speak English will feel a little bit inferior. So we don't want that to happen. So we all emphasize studying Japanese and speaking. All of our staff learns Japanese and things like that. So actually, I'll just pass it to Nozomi to talk about your ladies.
My ladies. Okay, this wasn't part of the question that Billy sent, so I'm not ready to speak about my ladies. But so we had 5 people baptized last year, and 4 out of 5 had non-Christian background. So that I think Japan is a little different from the other countries, and so people just have a lot of people just have absolutely no church background or Christian background. So a lot of people said, "What's Bible and what's church? What's Christ?" And so we have to start from zero, and how there's God who created everything, and just we have to explain everything, and then they start finally listening to the Bible and open up. Okay, I'm ready to hear what you have to say. But anyway, so these 4 ladies, and they each have different stories, but they somehow started coming to church. And let's see, my mind is just, I don't know, I have 4 different ladies, but maybe I should share one lady. Mariko and Yasu. Okay, so Mariko, so she's one of the 4 ladies, and she was looking for a job, and she went to a city place to look for a job, and she was introduced to a job which was owned by Christian, and then so she got a job there, and then all the workers, they were Christian workers, and they started talking, sharing the gospel with her, and then they said, maybe you should try church. And then she showed up one day at church, and she actually, she and her husband adopted a child. And adoption is not very common. And I think she heard that this is actually coming from Christian. And adoption is Christian. God adopted us as a child of God, children of God. So she was like, oh, I should go to church. And then, so she came to church. And she brought her husband and her daughter. And her husband did not want to come to church. And everybody can tell. And we tried to say hi to him, and he was just he looked down. And he was just, after the service, he's ready to go home. but anyway, so but she was just so open and wanting to learn. And we had a study called First Step, and it's a Bible study for non-Christians. And again, so this First Step tells you everything. And so we went through, and then she was ready to accept Christ. And then she was baptized, and then her husband saw that. And it just kind of opened his mind and heart. And then he now started doing the first step with Kevin and other men. But anyways, where was I going? So that's that's just Mariko is one of these ladies, one of the four ladies.
Awesome.
But it's just really exciting things happening, and those Japanese ladies, I meet with them weekly, and they're just so wanting to learn the Bible, and they're just so excited about their faith, and it's just so exciting to see those four ladies are wives and moms. And they're starting Christian family, and I just, it's very exciting because they're probably a year, 2 years ago, they have no idea. They didn't know anything about God.
Yeah.
They didn't know anything about Bible. So.
That's awesome.
Mariko, just some of my observations. She now reaches out to the new people that are coming, right? So that's a really cool thing to see where she's come to Christ, and this is the best thing in my life. And now, we don't even have to work as hard once more, people come to Christ because they reach out to the people. And then this last Sunday, I was talking to Yasu, and Mariko's husband, Yasu, and he's really trying to understand what we're talking about in the Bible. There's no word for God in Japanese, by the way, right? Think about that for a second. There's no word for God. Think about that. You can't talk about anything in the Bible, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so
how does in a Japanese Bible, what word? Is it a bunch of different words that are used to translate for God, or how?
I'll tell you the Japanese, but then I'll tell you how they would hear it.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Okay,
yeah.
So the Japanese is kami.
Yeah.
And the way you're going to hear it is spirit.
Okay.
Like lowercase s.
Yeah.
Right. Apparently, the word God came from Gott or something in German or Germanic language a long time ago. And it was actually a similar story, apparently. But anyways, so Yasu he's trying to figure out our sermons and what we're talking about. It's I feel like this idea of the Holy Spirit, I feel like I can get that. And his wife was right there, and he's like, what are you talking about? You said you don't understand anything about that. And he's like, no, but I feel something about it. You're starting to understand, Yasu. So that's kind of the dynamics in the husband and wife relationship. So this is a rare thing for the wife to kind of lead the husband in Japan. Usually it doesn't work, but this is just a really cool thing that I think God is doing. And last time we came, which was in the summer, we asked you guys, would you pray for men to come and for Japanese men to come and become more leaders? Yeah. Keep praying for him. Awesome. For Yasu. I guess it's okay to use his name, but yeah, Yasu.
Billy, how can we help these folks? How can we, I'm so excited. I love what they're doing. They're right on the frontier. What do we need to do? How can we better partner with them?
Yeah, well, I think for starters, just you guys being here and just telling us about your stories, your churches, your ministries. For us, we need to know what it is that the Lord's doing in your ministries, and so we can partner effectively. And so I think, one way is, through prayer. Jason on Sunday talked about, we talk about praying, giving, and going. And Jason really talked about prayer and how prayer is a dangerous thing when we think about the Great Commission, because prayer shapes our hearts and affections for the things of God among the nations. And so really, for our church to be able to hear you guys, they can pray for you, and be careful, guys, because the Lord could really use your prayers to shape your affections for ways that are unique and ways that you can serve this body. I think another way too is we can continue to come visit you guys, encourage you guys. We know that life on the field sometimes is difficult. So we really just want to encourage you all. I think another way too is just to pray that maybe the Lord would raise up some of our own people to come join your work in Paris and in Kobe, Santo Domingo, and then Greater Atlanta.
Well, and I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this like this, but like, Chris, I know he's here somewhere. I mean, I've just been so encouraged by his story, and obviously his coming over. Like, a part of his story has been, you guys, and just being able to partner with what the Lord is doing in Paris is, going to give shape to his whole ministry calling.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, we have Chris, we have Allie, we have Rachel Ganano, we have a number of members in our church that were impacted by short-term trips in such a way that they're considering leveraging their lives long-term for the sake of the gospel in Paris. And so the Lord uses all of these things to stir us up for the nations. And we really want to become a sending church. We want to send our own people out to go join this work. So, yeah.
We want to thank these guys. I mean, this has been awesome. We
Yeah,
all
it's been
thank these
amazing.
partners.
Yeah.
Investment. I know we're going to sing, but you want to go over the schedule of the weekend? I mean, we have a big weekend.
Yeah. So guys, we have a lot going on. Tomorrow is the men's lunch from 12 to 2. I really want to encourage the men in here to register and go to that event. That's going to be a great time where we get to hear from our male partners here. And we're going to do this problem-solving challenge activity where they're going to the men here are going to present these contextual challenges in their places of ministry and some problems that they're thinking through each and every day. And we as a church, as men, we get to try to help them solve these problems. So it'll be a fun activity. And then tomorrow night, we'll have a parish gathering for some of our parishes, and then we'll have another one on Saturday night. And then Saturday morning, we have a women's brunch. And that's going to be awesome. And we're going to be talking about prayer, and we're going to hear from our lady partners here about the power of prayer in their ministry. And then of course, Sunday, we are going to have Zane Pratt. He's coming to town. He works with the IMB. He's going to teach a couple classes on the state of global missions. And so I think that'll be really informative and really helpful for us. But we are really excited for the coming days. Guys, after this event, I know it's getting late. Our partner is going to be standing outside. You probably saw the flags. They're going to be standing underneath the flags. Go up and talk to them. Encourage them. Ask them more questions. This is why they're here. We are in partnership with them. We are together with them. And this is a time for mutual encouragement, mutual edification. And so go up and talk to them after the service.
And on the parish gatherings, I know tomorrow night is, I think it's northwest and central.
That's right.
And then Saturday is south and east. But if you can't make it Saturday,
just go to either one.
Yeah, just go to either one.
Absolutely. Yeah, the parish gathering is going to be great, guys. We're really focusing on prayer. Partners are going to open up and share some of their prayer requests. We're going to worship and pray around them, so it's going to be amazing. I want to encourage you guys to go to that. So, I'm going to go ahead and pray for you guys. And then we'll sing a few more songs, and then we'll get to mingle. Well, Father, it is such a privilege to be partnering in the gospel with these families. It really is a privilege, Lord, that you have sent these families to the nations, and you're using our church, just one local church, to be a part of that work. Lord, we pray that in the course of the next few days that you would teach us how to listen, how to partner, how to support, how to encourage these workers of the gospel, Lord. We want them to be built up, filled up, so that they are strong and strengthened going back to their churches. And so we are excited to learn from them. We're excited to learn from you, Lord. And we are just so thankful for this weekend. And so we give all of this to the praise of your name. In Jesus' name. Amen.